The fluorescent lights of Hawthorne Industries' executive floor flickered as 6-year-old Lily Martinez burst through the stairwell door, her small face streaked with tears and terror. Her patent leather shoes slapped against the polished marble as she ran, searching desperately through the maze of corridors until she found him. James Sullivan was on his knees, methodically cleaning the baseboards with the quiet precision that had made him nearly invisible to the executives who passed him daily. When Lily crashed into him, grabbing his worn janitor's uniform with trembling hands, her words came out in gasping sobs that made his blood run cold. "Please, please help. They're hurting my mom. She's in her office and they beat her and there's so much blood and she won't wake up." The little girl's eyes were wide with a horror no child should ever witness. And in that moment, something shifted in James Sullivan's carefully controlled expression, something dangerous and precise that no one in this building had ever seen before. James had worked as the night janitor at Hawthorne Industries for 3 years, a silent presence that people barely acknowledged. He arrived at 6 each evening, cleaned until 2 in the morning, and disappeared before the early executives arrived. He kept his head down, spoke little, wore the same faded blue uniform, and carried himself with the unremarkable bearing of a man content to be overlooked. No one knew anything about him beyond his name on the employment roster. No one asked. To the high-powered attorneys, tech executives, and corporate officers who rented office space in this downtown tower, janitors were part of the furniture, necessary, but invisible. But James had noticed Lily. Over the past few months, he'd seen her staying late with her mother, Elena Martinez, the young CEO of a promising biotech startup on the 12th floor. While other executives left at 5, Elena often worked until midnight, her daughter doing homework in the corner of her office, sometimes falling asleep on the small couch. James had started timing his cleaning of that floor to coincide with their presence, worried about a child being in an empty building so late. He'd bring Lily hot chocolate from the break room, let her draw pictures while he worked nearby, became the quiet guardian she didn't know she needed. She'd started calling him Mr. James, talking to him with the innocent trust children give to those who show them kindness. If you believe in heroes who hide in plain sight, in the power of one person to make a difference, please take a moment to like this video. Comment below about a time someone unexpected helped you. Share this story with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to keep bringing these powerful stories to light. James didn't hesitate. He scooped Lily into his arms and ran toward Elena's office with a speed and purpose that seemed impossible for a man who usually moved so deliberately. His mind shifted into a mode he hadn't accessed in years, training he'd buried when he left his old life behind. As they approached Elena's office, he heard voices, 2 men arguing about what to do next, their panic evident. He set Lily down gently in an alcove. "Stay here, don't move, don't make a sound," he commanded in a tone that made the little girl obey instantly, recognizing an authority that transcended his janitor's uniform. James pushed open the office door with a calm that belied the violence of the scene before him. Elena Martinez lay motionless on the floor behind her desk, blood pooling from a head wound, her breathing shallow and labored. 2 men stood over her. He recognized them as Roger Hastings and David Chen, executives from Hastings Pharmaceuticals, the major corporation that occupied the top 3 floors. They'd been trying to buy Elena's company for months, and she'd repeatedly refused, her research into affordable cancer treatments threatening their profit margins. Now they'd escalated from corporate pressure to something far darker. The men spun toward James, and Roger actually laughed with the arrogant confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. "Get out, janitor. This doesn't concern you. Go back to mopping floors before you get hurt." David was already pulling out his phone, likely to call someone to clean up what they'd done, to make Elena Martinez disappear into the category of unfortunate accidents that happened in empty office buildings late at night. What happened next occurred so quickly that if the building's security cameras hadn't captured it, no one would have believed it possible. James moved with a precision that spoke of years of training, of muscle memory carved into his body through countless hours of practice. In 3 fluid movements, he disarmed David, swept Roger's legs out from under him, and had both men restrained on the floor, their arms locked in positions that made any resistance agonizingly painful. His movements carried the efficiency of someone who'd done this hundreds of times before, someone whose body remembered what his life had been before he became invisible. He secured them using zip ties he pulled from his janitor's cart, the same cart that, if anyone had bothered to look closely, contained far more than cleaning supplies. Then he dropped to his knees beside Elena, his fingers finding her pulse point with practiced ease. She was alive, but barely. The head wound was serious, and she'd lost blood. James's training flooded back. Battlefield medicine, trauma response, the skills he'd learned as a combat medic before he'd become the other thing, the thing he never talked about. He grabbed the first aid kit from his cart, applying pressure to the wound with steady hands while simultaneously pulling out his phone and dialing 911 with the calm, precise information delivery of someone who'd made similar calls too many times before. While he waited for emergency services, he worked on Elena with the focused intensity that had once saved lives in far worse conditions than this corporate office. He stabilized her neck, elevated her legs, monitored her breathing, whispered to her in a steady voice that she was going to be okay, that Lily was safe, that help was coming. On the floor nearby, Roger and David groaned in pain and confusion, unable to comprehend how a janitor had neutralized them so completely. Within minutes, the building swarmed with police and paramedics. Officers entered Elena's office expecting to find a crime scene with victims, and instead found two corporate executives zip-tied on the floor and a janitor performing expert medical care on an injured woman. The senior paramedic, a veteran named Rodriguez, took one look at James's hand positioning and technique and stopped short. "Where'd you learn to do that?" he asked quietly. James just shook his head, stepping back to let the professionals take over. "Just trying to help," he said simply, already retreating into his invisible persona. But Detective Sarah Chen, who arrived to investigate what was clearly an attempted murder, wasn't willing to let James fade into the background. She'd pulled the security footage, watched his takedown of two men 40 pounds heavier than him, observed the medical care that had undoubtedly saved Elena's life. She ran his name through databases that most people didn't know existed, and what came back made her reassess everything she thought she knew about the quiet janitor. James Sullivan wasn't his real name, or rather, it was now legally changed 8 years ago. Before that, he'd been James Sullivan Mackenzie, decorated Army Ranger, combat medic, and later a field operative for a government agency whose official title was classified. He'd served 3 tours in hostile territories, earned commendations he could never display, saved lives in situations that never made the news. He'd been exceptional at his work, perhaps too exceptional, asked to do things that slowly eroded the line between protecting people and becoming what he fought against. So he'd walked away, taken early retirement, changed his name, and chosen the most unremarkable life he could find. He'd become invisible deliberately, trying to forget the things he'd seen and done, seeking peace in the simple rhythm of cleaning floors and emptying trash bins. When Elena woke up in the hospital 3 days later, Lily was asleep in a chair beside her bed, and James was there too, having checked on them every day, bringing the little girl meals and homework help, ensuring she wasn't alone. Elena's eyes focused on him with difficulty, her head wrapped in bandages, her memory of the attack fragmented. "You saved my life," she whispered, her voice raw. "Lily told me everything. She said you moved like a superhero, that you made the bad men stop hurting me." James shifted uncomfortably, unused to gratitude, unused to being seen. Anyone would have done the same, he deflected. But Elena shook her head, a movement she immediately regretted as pain flashed across her features. "No," she insisted firmly. "Not anyone. The police told me about your training, about who you were. They said if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't known exactly what to do, I would have died. Those men would have killed me and made it look like an accident, and Lily would have been an orphan." Tears streamed down her face as she reached for her daughter, pulling the sleeping child closer. "You gave me back my life. You gave my daughter back her mother." The investigation that followed exposed a conspiracy that reached far beyond one violent attack. Roger Hastings and David Chen, facing attempted murder charges, made deals with prosecutors that revealed a pattern of corporate intimidation, bribery, and violence that Hastings Pharmaceuticals had used for years to eliminate competition. Elena's research into affordable cancer treatments had threatened a multi-billion-dollar revenue stream, and she was just the latest in a line of scientists and entrepreneurs who'd been silenced. But she'd survived, thanks to a janitor who was so much more than he appeared, and her survival meant evidence was preserved, testimony was given, and the entire corrupt system began to crumble. The story exploded across media, not just locally but nationally. The narrative was irresistible. The invisible janitor with a secret past who saved the young CEO and her daughter, who brought down a corporate giant with his bare hands. Reporters camped outside the hospital, outside James's modest apartment, demanding interviews, offering book deals and movie rights. James refused them all, deeply uncomfortable with the attention, wanting only to return to his quiet life. But that life was no longer possible. Hawthorne Industries offered him a position as head of security, a job he declined. Elena's company, once she recovered, offered him a place on her executive team. Again, he refused. Yet he couldn't go back to being invisible either. Too many people knew his story now, knew his capabilities, needed what he could offer. If this story has moved you, if you felt the power of one person's courage to act when it mattered most, please show your support by liking this video and leaving a comment. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes walk among us every day. Your engagement means everything and helps these stories reach people who need to hear them. The solution came from an unexpected source. Detective Chen approached James with a proposal from the police department. They wanted him to train their crisis response teams, to teach them the medical and tactical skills he'd honed over years of service. No publicity, no spotlight. Just the opportunity to pass on knowledge that could save lives. It was perfect for him, a way to use his skills meaningfully while maintaining the quiet existence he'd chosen. Elena, once recovered, did something that surprised everyone who knew her. She established the Sullivan Foundation, named after the man who'd saved her life, dedicated to providing security and protection for entrepreneurs and researchers working on projects that threatened corporate interests. She'd learned the hard way that innovation often came with danger, that people trying to make the world better sometimes became targets. The foundation would ensure that others didn't have to face what she'd faced alone. James tried to protest the name, uncomfortable with the recognition, but Elena was insistent. "You spent years being invisible, helping people without recognition," she told him firmly. "You can't stop me from making sure your impact continues long after we're both gone. Before we finish, we want to hear from you. What would you have done in James's situation? Would you have revealed your past to help someone in danger? Please take a moment to comment below. We read every single one, and your thoughts create a community around these stories." Lily recovered from the trauma with the resilience of childhood, helped by therapy and the knowledge that the man she'd trusted had proven worthy of that trust. She understood, in the way children understand profound truths, that heroes didn't always wear capes or badges. Sometimes they wore janitors' uniforms and cleaned floors, waiting quietly for the moment when they were needed most. She visited James regularly at his new training facility, bringing him drawings and stories about school, maintaining the bond they'd formed in those late-night hours when he'd been watching over her mother. James eventually found peace with his new life, one that existed somewhere between his invisible past and the unwanted spotlight. He trained first responders, taught life-saving skills, occasionally consulted on security for companies working on important research. He'd learned that he couldn't completely escape what he'd been, but he could choose what he became. The skills that had once been used in darkness could serve in light. The training that had made him dangerous could make him protective. The past he'd tried to bury could be transformed into a future that saved lives. Years later, when Lily graduated from college with a degree in biomedical engineering, following in her mother's footsteps, she gave a speech that brought the entire auditorium to tears. She spoke about the night that had changed everything, about the quiet janitor who'd saved her mother's life. about how one person's choice to act could ripple outward in ways impossible to measure. She spoke about invisible heroes, about people who carry extraordinary capabilities but choose humble paths, about the courage it takes to help even when helping means revealing yourself. James sat in the back of that auditorium, still uncomfortable with recognition, still happier in the shadows than in spotlights. But he smiled as Lily spoke, understanding finally that being invisible wasn't the same as being insignificant. That the greatest heroism wasn't always loud or obvious. That sometimes the most powerful thing a person could do was simply be present, be ready, and be willing to act when a frightened child ran through the corridors crying for help. Elena had survived. Her research had continued, and her affordable cancer treatments were now saving thousands of lives. Hastings Pharmaceuticals had been dismantled, its corrupt executives imprisoned. The Sullivan Foundation protected dozens of innovators who might otherwise have been silenced. And Lily had grown into a confident young woman who understood that safety wasn't just about locks and security systems. It was about people who chose to care, to notice, to act. The janitor had revealed his secret skill. And in doing so, he'd saved more than just one life that night. He'd saved a future, protected innovation, demonstrated that power wielded with precision and compassion could overcome power wielded through corruption and violence. He'd proven that the most dangerous person in any building might be the one everyone overlooked, and that sometimes the greatest gift we can give the world is simply being ready when we're needed most. In the end, James Sullivan never returned to complete invisibility, but he found something better. Purpose without prominence, impact without ego, a life of quiet service that saved lives and trained others to do the same. He remained humble, still uncomfortable with praise, still preferring actions to words. But he'd learned that hiding wasn't the same as healing, that running from your past wasn't as powerful as transforming it, and that sometimes the most heroic thing you could do was simply be present when a little girl ran through the halls, desperate and terrified, searching for someone, anyone, who would choose to help. The CEO's little girl had run to a janitor, and in that choice, she'd found exactly the hero she needed. Not because of his secret skills or his hidden past, but because when it mattered most, James Sullivan had chosen to be seen, to act, to care. And that choice had changed everything.